All right, so we're going live today, and I have a guest who should be popping into the room anytime now. And her name is Lorie Alexandria, and we're going to be talking about ADHD and following up with Steve Horn and our conversation from last week. I'm so excited to introduce her, and we'll get her in the room here today.
Oh, it works.
Yay! Here we are.
I was on there and it wasn't saying anything, and then now all of a sudden I'm on live. Like, what just happened?
Perfect. So here we are.
Chaos.
Yay. So we're on Get Resourced, and it's usually with Andre and myself and maybe one of our guests, but he's away camping, winter camping with the men this weekend. So I get the honor of interviewing Miss Lorie Alexandria. And yeah, I'm pretty excited. So for those of you that don't know, Facebook is going to discontinue live videos. They're not going to be held for very long. So if you want to watch some of our replays and some of the amazing conversations that we have, go to our YouTube channel, Get Resourced, all one word. It'll also be below this live so that you can subscribe and follow for these amazing conversations. So, Miss Lorie, I'm pleased to have you here. I never thought of talking about ADHD on our Get Resourced, but we talk about how we can resource ourselves from the inside rather than relying on outside sources for information because, well, you can get easily overwhelmed. And I'm going to introduce you here in a moment, but I just wanted to ask you today, what we usually do is a check-in with each other to say, what's alive in you today?
Spring. I can actually go outside with my dog in the morning now, and I don't need to bundle up before I take him outside at 7 a.m. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that.
It's a nice feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. The sun is shining, the snow is melting. It's fantastic. It's not minus 30.
Yeah, it was just a little too cold for me, actually.
I'm really hoping that's the end of it. Do you think it's the end of it? Like, is this spring or not? Are we being duped?
I don't think it's gonna get as cold. No, I think we're mostly in the clear. I think it might snow one or more times, but I don't think it's gonna stay on the ground. Yeah. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, we're streaming from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So we're up in the cold north here. And what's alive in me today? Actually, the sun is streaming through the windows. I get to see my beautiful plants here, and I'm excited. I'm going to see if I can actually go skiing with what snow is left on the ground this afternoon after we chat. So
nice.
I'm excited about that. So I want to introduce you. I've got your bio here. And I'm so curious because I think you just currently left the oil and gas industry in your,
Yes.
we might call our regular jobs. And we're going to have an interesting conversation about our relationships with contribution, with work, and also labels today. I'm looking forward to it. So Lorie, you are calling yourself an ADHD mindset coach, speaker, and founder of the ADHD Rebel Movement. Ooh, I'm excited about that. I like rebels. She bridges the gap between ADHD and personal development, helping women break free from self-doubt, rewire their mindset, and transform their self-images so they can step into their most confident, unstoppable selves. You've got a no BS approach. You empower ADHD women to ditch the victim mentality. Like that. Our culture is very victim oriented. Own their strengths and take control of their lives through her coaching, events, and upcoming Rebel Minds podcast. That'll be fun. Lorie's on a mission to redefine what it means to have ADHD, proving that ADHD women not only capable, but born to lead, create, and thrive. Woo! Yes.
It sounds so cool when you say it.
Yeah, okay. Well, it is cool. How can we overcome what we think our society thinks is wrong and maybe live into more of our own creative power? I know when we talked before this live, we were talking about the masculine society and how so many of us are forced to fit into, well,
boxes,
square pegs, boxes, whatever. So Tell me more about that. You came from the oil and gas industry and you had to get yourself out.
Yeah, well, so I worked in oil and gas for a really long time, like over 10 years, but I spent almost 10 years saying, what am I doing here? Why do I work here? It was one of those things that you're supposed to do. Like you're
Mhm.
supposed to, I grew up in the oil and gas industry. My family works in oil and gas. And so, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go and get this job and work at it for 40 years. And it doesn't matter if you like it or not. And I didn't hate every part of it, but I definitely felt like I could be contributing in a different way. I definitely wanted to have more freedom in my life. But what happened was I used to work in mining. So I used to sit in my work truck all the time in the mine. And I would just talk on Instagram. Like I would post videos about my life or basically about the chaos in my life. And I would talk about ADHD and I would very openly, I had no problem talking about it. I had no problem admitting I had ADHD. I started to get a lot of messages from people that were telling me that they felt really seen and heard because of how open I was talking about it. And I was making them feel really validated. And I even had people say, "You helped me understand my husband better." Or I had people asking, "Do you think that I should get my child diagnosed?" And my messages would blow up with all these messages and comments from people. And at the time, it was really overwhelming because I was just talking shit. I wasn't trying to help people. And
Right.
I felt like really uncomfortable about that. I was like, oh my God, I'm not the person you should ask. And then I thought, well, what if I was though? What if I actually tried to help people? Like, what if I leaned into this in an intentional way? I could make a difference in people's lives and help them embrace their ADHD and own the good and the bad and, level up in their own lives. And so, yeah, that's now here we are. That's how that
Okay.
happened.
So this is cool because we're on the backs of our previous episode with Steve Horn. He's a men's coach for people with ADHD, and now we have you as a women's coach. Um, I know he talked about the what is it, the farmer and the hunter kind of.
It's my
Uh,
favorite.
that's your favorite?
It's
Yeah.
my
Okay.
favorite theory. I remember
Okay.
when I first heard that theory, it solidified for me that we all bring something different. Like if we were, I was telling you the other day, I have never wanted to be typical. So when you say neurotypical, there's no part of me that was ever thinking I want to be typical and ordinary and just like everybody else. I never wanted that. And I spent my entire life kind of against the status quo, being a rebel. That's why I really brought that into my coaching because I think to be an ADHD rebel is somebody that embraces that and says, yeah, I have ADHD and I'm happy about that. I'm proud of it. Um, so I think that, the hunter gatherer or the hunter farmer theory really just exploded for me. I thought it was so amazing because so the hunters are the people that take the risks and protect the farm. But then the farmer, we need those different people. Like you need that balance, like the yin and the yang, like you do. You need the people that are the rebels and the risk takers, and then you need the people that are, organized and calm, cool, collected over here doing the work. So, I mean, I often think so. I'm not the most organized person. And I'm okay with that because you know what? There's people that love that. There are people that love organizing. They love to do those things. Who am I to take that away from them? I'll just delegate. You want to come organize my life? Go ahead. So I think that we all bring different gifts to the world. We all have different strengths. And I think that part of the problem with ADHD is that we
Yes.
spend so much of our time focusing on what we're not good at. So, like, I probably beat myself up for a long time about the fact that I'm not organized. I spent a lot of my time trying to be the way you're supposed to be and do the things you're supposed to do. And especially for women, we've got so many labels on us. We're supposed to be the organized, put together planners. Like, that's just how society sort of told us we were supposed to act. So I've kind of always been just living my own life and carving my own path. And then I think that if I didn't have all these expectations on me for like what I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do, I don't think that my ADHD would have been such a problem because,
No.
yeah,
Isn't
if it
that
wasn't
interesting?
dictated that I was supposed to do this and that, I wouldn't have been hitting a wall. Imagine if I had spent time embracing the things I was good at and embracing my strengths, where I would be now, the things that I would have done if I hadn't wasted so much time focusing on the things that I'm not good at.
Yeah. And that's a question I have. And I've got a couple books here. harebrained tortoise mind. And
I love it.
yeah, I love it because I think the neurotypical is more about the harebrained, the logical, linear way of thinking. And so I
Mhm.
thought I'd read this to you because I think you might like it. And I think it relates to ADHD, which I want to redefine because I think it's attention deficit disorder. And I think I might like to call it attuned to a higher dimension.
Love
But
that.
yeah, right.
Big fan.
So this is written by Guy Claxton, and he says how intelligence increases when you think less. So he says the individuals and societies of the West have lost touch with the value of contemplation. Only active thinking is regarded as productive. Sitting, gazing absently, and this is how I think ADHD is often thought of, out your office wall or classroom window is not of value. Yet many of those whom our society admires as icons of creativity and wisdom have spent a lot of their time doing nothing. Einstein, it said, would frequently be found in his office at Princeton staring into space. The Dalai Lama spent hours each day in meditation. Even that paragon of penetrating insight, Sherlock Holmes, is described by his creator as entering a meditative state with vacant, dreamy expression in his eyes. Now, there are a number of ways and reasons slow knowing has fallen into disuse. Partly, it's our changing concept and attitude towards time. And so I would love to know more about the concept of time in ADHD.
Oh
He goes
gosh.
to say people are busier now creating wealth and saving time. Western mindset, time becomes this commodity, and an inevitable consequence is to think faster and to solve problems and to make decisions quickly. And this is super interesting. He says, now Western society, which covers the globe, we have this inner psychological culture of speed and pressure and the need for control mirroring the culture of efficiency and productivity. We urgently want explanations, theories of everything, more data, more ideas. We want them faster and tell us clearly what to do. We're in a culture which has had lost sight, inadvertently trapped in a single mode of mind that is characterized by information gathering, intellect, and impatience. So I'm curious what you have to think about that because I know you said you, and of course with the ADHD, there's a few ways of managing it. Steve Horn talked about using dedication over medication to get some of the stuff he needed done. And you both said a very similar thing, that medication helped you do stuff you didn't like or didn't want to do. And so I'm curious about that.
Just
Yeah.
a comment on what you read there. They do say that money loves speed. Like I've heard that forever. Money loves speed. And
Uh-huh.
that, the quicker you make decisions, and decision
Mhm.
making isn't, I don't know, one of my strong suits, I would say. Like I've told people before that I used to get overwhelmed in a food court. It would stress me out so much trying to decide what to eat that I would actually get so mad I probably didn't eat. That was long before I knew I had ADHD. I think once you know that you have it and you understand how your brain works, it's easier to navigate. Um, but yeah, when it comes to medication, so I've said multiple times, I'm not against medication because I do know people whose lives it has changed. How could I ever say not to take it when, and you have ADHD, you have a higher chance of being an addict or committing suicide or living on the street. And so there's some people whose lives have been drastically changed and are probably still here because of medication. So I absolutely do believe in it. But I don't really take it because I think that I didn't get diagnosed till I was in my late 30s. So at that time, I had already spent so many years navigating having ADHD without even knowing it. I had already created systems without even trying it that, I'm kind of raw dogging ADHD, and I just continue to do that. I did take medication. I've tried a few different ones. Sometimes, they're just, I don't know, it's a real, you really have to commit to it because there's so many different kinds. There's so many different dosages you can take, and then sometimes you'll really crash from them. But again, like it's kind of trial and error. And I just didn't really have the patience for the trial and error. I was like, you know what? This isn't really for me. I don't want to do this anymore. Kind of over it. But when I worked in oil and gas, I used to work night shifts sometimes. and I would have to do so much paperwork, and I just hate it. Like the administrative side of things is so not my jam. I do not like monotonous tasks. I can't. And in order to force myself to do it, I would take meds because even though medication doesn't help you, like sometimes you could take medication to do your assignment and instead you end up cleaning your room. Like it doesn't necessarily help you focus on what you need to focus on. But in that realm, like at work, what else am I going to do other than the paperwork? I'm not going to clean the trailer. So it was easier for me to focus on it then. So it did help me. Absolutely it did. But definitely not something that I take long term. I do a lot of other things to help instead of medication. But again, I do believe in it.
Right.
You also talked about thinking, and yeah, I think I am so guilty of this. I hate silence. So I always have something playing, like a podcast or music, always, whether I'm even really listening to it or not. I hate silence. And what I came to realize was because I don't like to be alone with my thoughts. Because I have ADHD, I like, man, like a ping pong ball, the amount of different thoughts I have. But what I realized was if I actually lean into that, sometimes if I'm driving and I drive in silence, I'll almost solve world hunger, I swear. Like I'll have the best ideas. Or if I go for a walk with my dog or just out in nature and I don't listen to anything, you're able to tap into your subconscious thoughts maybe or your beliefs, and you're able to solve problems that you might have in your life if you give yourself the time to lock into your thoughts. And I don't really think that we do that very much.
No, it's an interesting culture that we have. And I always describe it as I'm an abstract random thinker rather
I like
than a
that.
logical linear one. And so being able to take different areas of thought and bring them to a cohesive whole. So in our culture, we're all about expertise and boxed areas, but often problems aren't solved by looking at one piece. It's kind of like,
Mhm.
okay, let's see, my knee's sore. Oh, let's take apart your knee and everything else without looking at maybe the hip joint or the other joint or all of these other things. So like they talked about Einstein and the Dalai Lama and Sherlock Holmes, how they were able to solve great mysteries through the ability to allow the mind to create different aspects and bring them together as a cohesive whole. And I always think about time because we're under so much time pressure that we don't have the time just to be at ease to solve problems in a different way. And I notice Dre's more masculine in his way of doing work, but I will often just take rests, and it gives me such anxiety to see someone's schedule so full. And I will come up with ideas and execute them. I'm also a manifesting generator in the human design, so it's a bit different that way as well. But
I got none in the
ide-
generator.
yeah, ideas will come to me. And that's the other thing about abstract random thinkers or ADHD is often they think in pictures or imagination versus the logical linear. And we know that pictures speak 1,000 words. So
Mhm.
they're 1,000 times faster than a logical linear brain.
I
And
actually think that's one of our talents, though, is to be able to think in an abstract way, like to bring things together that other people more like most likely wouldn't, to see the connection between things that other people wouldn't. I know sometimes if I'm talking, I'll bounce from one idea to the other because in my mind I've linked them. They all connect.
yeah,
In you can't see how they connect, but I do because
yeah.
so and so probably told me that while I was at that event. Oh yeah, and then that event is where I learned this, and yeah, so it all connects in my mind. And so I think that, it's almost like that movie, A Beautiful Mind, you've got all the, like a spider web. And I actually think that's one of our greatest talents is to be able to see all the different connection points and how things come together.
I agree with you. And so what's the main benefit of being able to see connection points between different areas, do you think?
Well, I think if you're trying to solve a problem, you're able to see it on a broader scale. It's not just A plus B equals C. You're able to think outside the box and it's not linear thinking. I think it's, you know, like you said, more abstract. And you'd almost have more ideas, not just one idea. You're kind of shooting out multiple ideas. Oh, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. It allows you to really navigate where the actual problem could be or where the solution could be, actually. If we're trying to get from here to here, what's the solution?
Right. Because a lot of people in our culture, they don't see that the questions we're asking are actually the problem. And
Yeah.
so we're so myopic and so focused that there is a problem that we have to fix. And maybe it's the overarching culture itself. Um, this is
Yeah.
interesting too. I'm going to share some crazy stuff with people today. Cultures of healing. So this is Robert Fancher. He's a PhD in psychology and stuff like that. And this is his term. I've come to think that mental health care is fundamentally part of our public conversation that constitutes life in our society, and its recommendations are moral and social programs. Mental illness and disorder are social constructs. They are inventions of modern society. They are not facts given in nature, but ideas developed by social groups and legitimized by consensual validation. Someday, we may know which kinds of enduring distress are due to failures in essential functions of human psychology or biology, and which are matters of the clash between how we evolved and how we lived. We should not pretend our social judgments are science. I love that. And
Me too.
part of my belief is that since there's such a big exponential numbers of ADHD, is that perhaps it's an evolvement. Perhaps we're evolving, and love to get your
I
opinion.
think that for him to say, it's something we created as a disorder, I think that you got the typical person, right? Anybody who doesn't fit into those boxes is like a disorder. Something's wrong. Something's not, even if it's not a disorder in a way where it's affecting your life in a really bad way. But imagine if we looked at it. So there's white people and black people. There's neurotypical people and neurodivergent people. Nobody is better than the other. We all bring different things to the table. Like, why don't we just celebrate the differences? But we don't really do that. We more so judge and try to fix people who have the differences. So I'm not sure if we would really have all the mental health disorders if we didn't judge them. And imagine if we celebrated them instead. They wouldn't be disorders. They would be things that you would boast about, and you'd be like, oh my, like, for example, I think so. I attend a lot of events, and I'm a very social person, and I meet a lot of people, and when I tell them what I do, they say, oh, I have ADHD. And I always say, yeah, I know.
Oh,
because because the people who are saying this are the girl with the green hair or the funky earrings or the neon pink pants. It's the girls with the pizzazz. It's the girls that are standing out. And it's more often than not that, yeah, they have ADHD. I think that we bring something different to the table. We are the opposite of beige. We're like neon pink. And so when they say that to me, I'm like, yeah, I know. And I'm not saying it based on any conversation I've had. It's just the appearance that they have, like how they're putting themselves out into the world. I think, yeah, like I said, we bring the pizzazz, and we should celebrate that. We should start being like, yeah, I'm a badass. I got ADHD. I'm creative and a risk taker, and I solve problems. And yeah, I think we should start embracing it and celebrating. And then we wouldn't so much say disorder.
right. Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about disorder, there's a lot of disorder and chaos in our world. If there's anything that needs fixing, it's our judgments of how we go about things.
Hmm.
Um, I'm curious because you say there's a lot of other things that you do. I mean, we are in a very masculine focus doing type of society. What do you think it is that people with ADHD or a more creative mindset bring to the table that allows us to become healthier, more evolved as species? And why should we start embracing that, do you think?
Why should we start embracing the fact that we have ADHD?
Yeah, the creativity, the pieces of it. Why should we all not be worried? And maybe that's why AI is coming about. They can start doing all the paperwork and the mundane tasks, and we can start
Yeah.
looking at how do we
Holy, you are
create?
right. I'd say
Yeah.
that ChatGPT is my personal assistant. I've been saying that for a while now. I think that your self-image and your beliefs control how you show up in the world. So if you are told something is wrong with you and your self-image is that you have a disorder and something is wrong with you, that's how you're going to show up. That's how you're going to live your life. That's how you're going to present yourself to the world, as somebody who has something wrong with them, somebody who's not as capable, not as organized. Like the world doesn't need more organization. We need more acceptance and more people that are like authentic. We need
Mm.
more realness in the world. So I'm not so concerned with how quickly I folded my towels. I don't really care about that. Whatever. But my self-image, since I've really embraced the fact that I have a different brain, has drastically changed. I show up as me and I love the good and the bad. And not to say that it isn't debilitating at times, it absolutely is. But guess what? Normal people also have bad days. We all have bad days. Like, I've really gotten to a place where I've really come to realize that consistency isn't key, not in an ADHD life. Persistency is key. Some days I'm not going to get off the
Oh,
couch. I'm not going to do the task. But you know what? I have ADHD. So another day will come and I'll have a better day tomorrow. I don't beat myself up about that stuff anymore. I don't get lost in the downward spiral of it because I just understand that that's just a part of how my life's playing out.
so can you say that again? Consistency versus persistency. Is that
So
what you
I
said?
don't believe that consistency is key. I believe that persistency is.
Mm.
Because if you fall off a lot of times people talk about creating better habits for yourself and, sticking to routines. And that's actually really hard for someone with ADHD. I might stick to it for 5 days, but on the sixth day, it's probably not going to work for me this morning. Right. And I think that's okay. That is actually okay. Because as long as on the seventh day, you get, or even if you don't do the same things every day, but you do, generally the best you can do that day, like bring the best of yourself to that day, I think you're doing good. So as long as you don't beat yourself up so much that you're like, oh, my ADHD, this sucks. I can't do this. I can't stick to routine. I suck. As soon as you start doing that, then you're hooped. If
Right.
instead
I
you're
think
like, you know what,
it's,
tomorrow's another day, way better.
yeah. So consistency and persistency. Yeah. I mean, I think of consistency as really a conveyor belt. Like we're meant to be these objectified items on a conveyor belt, like not sentient beings that can feel different energies in the world.
Mhm.
I mean, not to get too esoteric, but they literally in a psych ward in a hospital, they know when it's a full moon, it fills up. They do. It's very full. I used to work in one, so I know.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, it's very full on full moons, and they've come to expect that. But
That's so
persistency,
interesting.
allowing ourselves to be human, not worry about how clean our kitchen
Yeah.
is all the time. Like you said, folding our towels, cutting the grass. Why is it that we don't have wild flowers growing in our front yard? Why do we need to make
Yeah.
it look manicured and perfect and the British perfect, whatever we think something is?
Yeah.
Um, and
And
why
you
is it that
follow, nobody wants to follow, if I wanted to join the army, I would have joined the army. I'm not trying to follow a very regimented, this is what time I eat, this is what time I make my bed. This, like, yeah, I thrive on routine, sure. But I also thrive on, giving myself that grace that, oh, that's not going to work for me today. I'm not going to do that today. I was supposed to go to the gym this morning. You know what I did instead? I put new sheets on my bed last night and my bed was so comfy today. I spent an extra hour snuggling my dog in my bed. I didn't go to the gym. I'm fine. My day's still great. Like, I'm not gonna, that's great. That's what served me today. I was like, I'm just gonna stay here.
right? What do you say about people who say, well, that's all good, but like you need to work, you need to like make income, you need to do something to support yourself? Like that sounds pretty flaky, Lori. Like,
Well, I don't work at the gym. Um, I think that I love your nails. Thank you. Sorry, I was just reading a comment there.
I
Yeah,
actually
I
can't see
actually
the
believe.
comments. Where are I can't see the
Oh,
comments on my side, which is interesting. So,
I actually love this
um,
book. It's called The Science of Getting Rich. Have you read it?
oh
Incredible.
no, no, I
It's
haven't seen.
only if you I actually don't read, I listen to audiobooks because I find it hard to sit down and read. So I listen to audiobooks and it's only like 2 hours and something long, and I have listened to it multiple times. He says that you owe it to yourself to be the best, like, best that you can be. And in doing that, financially, I think if money is in the hands of good people, more good goes into the world. I think that you have an obligation to be as rich as you possibly can. Like, I really do believe that. Why not? I have an abundant mindset. I think there's enough for everybody. Go out and get it. You get one life. Just go get the income, be as rich as you possibly can. Because then, if you're in a bad situation, especially as women, and you have money, you can get yourself out of it, or you can help someone else get out of it. Or, I donate to a lot of animal rescues, and I'm able to do that because you have money, right? So I think that money in the hands of good people, I think that you should be making good money, absolutely. But I don't think that you should be a slave to a system and a job that you hate. Like, maybe for a period of time if it's setting you up to do something else. But I think, I really believe that we have one life, and I think you should make the most of the one life. And if you're wishing your time away every day, I can't wait till the weekend so I can get out of
Mhm.
here. That sucks.
It does.
That sucks. Are you going to do that for 20 years, 20 plus years? Like, oh my God, no, I just don't want that anymore for my life.
Right, and then I can't remember his name, but, Bronson at Virgin Mobile. So I think dyslexia and ADHD kinda go in hand. My daughter has both. My
Mhm.
ex-husband has dyslexia, I have ADHD, whatever. But the creative minds are able to make a ton of money by finding
Yeah.
solutions to problems that we don't understand, and it's so interesting that in a world, I think some of the more economic elite, they really want a lot of workers. And so, how do we keep them workers and keeping us, feeding the economic machine that our world is and our corporations? And even
Well, I
Rockefeller.
don't think everyone is a visionary, right?
Well, no, that's true.
So I'm a manifester in human design. So I'm all vision, I'm all ideas, and I really
Mhm.
struggle with the execution of the ideas. So there's this book, Rocket Fuel, really great book. It talks about that. It talks about that there's two different types of people in the world: people who are visionaries and people who are, I can't remember what they call them, maybe executioners or something. So there's like the dreamers and the doers, kind of, and they are a great match when they link up. So you will always have people that are wanting to, very be tactile and do the work. And then you'll have people who are all the ideas. Like, I mean, Steve Jobs was the ideas. He didn't make the iPhone. He didn't sit down with a little tiny screwdriver and put it all together, right? He had ADHD, and he's like, we all respect and think that he was a genius, and he was, but he was
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah. So I wonder then if they could be okay. We're in an organization, and they don't think about the type of creativity or
I know.
brain types. So maybe we need a few people with
I know.
ADHD, or we need the creative people, the manifesting generators.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more study about what creates a holistic organization that allows everybody to function in a way that um, creates organizations that focus on everybody's strengths, like you said.
Mhm. I think that's brilliant. I think that in some ways we are moving into that. I've seen certain, like even certain companies have it so that the office is open all day, and you can come in and work in the office one day if you want, work at home if you want. They have it like, not everywhere, of course, but I have seen some progression in the world in the past few years. I also know that there's people that go into companies and they'll do talks about inclusion in the workplace for people with ADHD. And what that looks like is, so in the morning, I'm not really very chatty. I'm not the happiest person in the morning. But I'm focused. I can focus on something in the morning, but my mornings would start out as a meeting. So my morning would be, I had to be communicating with other people, and I had to be on it. Whereas I would actually have been better in the morning doing the like administrative tasks, but I wasn't able to set my day up like that. I had to follow how they had set my day up. So really what should happen is, if we're going to have inclusion and we're going to have people say, "Hey, I have ADHD and the company is going to work with you." You should be able to say, "Hey, sometimes I need to close my door because I need to focus because all the noise is just going to drive me crazy." But a lot of people will just struggle through that, and they won't admit that that's what they need, and they don't advocate for themselves. And they don't say, "Hey, in the morning, I would actually like to not really be engaging with people. I'd like to focus on this task because I'll get this done faster if I do. But it's actually beneficial for the companies because then you'd get people working the best way that they can. And that would create an environment where people would not hate being at work, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's interesting because once you put all these different beings together, it creates that challenge of, well, if you're better in the morning and someone else is better at night, so how do we work them together? Um,
Yeah.
but you know what that boils down to for me now that you're talking about that is really about people's needs and being able to express them
Yes.
honestly and know who they are authentically
Mhm.
and being able to
Yes.
communicate that.
Yeah. So if you don't know you have ADHD, I mean, I didn't for like most of my life. How do you explain your needs if you don't understand yourself? That's why I so support getting a diagnosis. Like,
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
not saying I understand that there's a stigma around the label, but the diagnosis itself will allow you to not only like it's confirmation that the things that you're struggling with, it confirms it for you. You're like, oh, okay, yeah. Turns out I do have this. And it's not an excuse, it's a reason. It really validates, the struggles, and you can you can change them from struggles into strengths once you understand it. But how do you advocate for yourself if you don't even understand yourself? It has to start with self-awareness.
True. No, yeah, self-awareness is key, isn't it? So when you were diagnosed, like what was your thought process? Like I think you mentioned it, like, Steve, at first you're like, "Oh my God," like there's a sense of a loss and regret.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
in the beginning, so at first I'm like, "Oh my God, it all makes sense." Like your whole life, you're just like, "Oh my God, everything, all the pieces come together." Like we were saying, the abstract thinking, everything just culminates in the center. But then I was angry and I was bitter, so angry. I'm so bitter at like, where would I be now? What would I have done? Would I have finished that program in school? Would I have, stayed? So I move around a lot. I've like
mm,
spent my whole adult life. I went from, Newfoundland and Montreal to Toronto to overseas. I moved around a lot. And I always felt like I was on the run and I was always chasing something else, but I was chasing novelty because my brain runs on novelty. Now that I understand that, I'm still going to move around because I clearly enjoy it. I'm having a great time. I love experiencing new places. So now that I know that about myself, I'm not questioning, why am I not settling down? Why do I not want that life that other people have? Because now I understand my brain. But I was so bitter. I thought back on relationships. One of the issues with ADHD is regulating our emotions, and I would just go off, and I just didn't understand, why do I get so mad? Why do I react the way that I do? And then I learned about rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I learned about emotional intelligence. And, so I just really self awareness like really changed my life. But I was angry and bitter, resentful. I thought about all the teachers that said, Lorie needs to try harder and she's not applying
mm.
herself. And of course, I wasn't. I hated it. I don't, I, I hated it. Math, oh my God, I hated it. But I was so good at English and I was so good at writing and I absolutely loved to draw. I was so good at the arts. And instead of them saying, you know what, we're gonna help you do this and you're gonna lean into that, they're like, no, 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 no. You need to come over here and get good at math like everybody else, because everybody needs to be getting the same grades and the same courses and become the same people. So I was pretty bitter. And then I got into a stage where I just sort of started to learn about ADHD. And I really went from like a bitterness to not just acceptance, but wow, this is why I'm like this. This is kind of cool. And oh wow, this is why my brain thinks all these things. That's kind of cool. And I just really went completely on the other side to, why are we hiding this? Why are we shaming ourselves for it? Why do we have so much guilt? We should be like, everything that I am and the life that I've lived is because of this ADHD brain that I have. And so I'm jazzed about that now.
Right? I
Yeah.
am too. Especially, I have to admit that the diagnosis piece really turns me off. And now that I've heard you and Steve, I'm like, okay, I can really accept that. Except I really hate attention deficit disorder
Oh, me
because
too.
I tune to a higher dimension or a new way. Like when you said novelty is how my brain works, I'm like, yeah, I get easily bored. Like easily bored. I've taught programs for the city for 10 years. I do different things. And I find I can learn things and become masters at it easily. because I bring different pieces of information together. And I definitely, like you say, you travel. You get so much more information from different places and different information that is just so much richer. It's kind of like just live in a white beige house or have different
Yeah.
colors and different
Like I said,
energies.
there's beige and then there's us. We're like neon pink over here, just all the life experiences and all the traveling. I mean, I did a talk one time. I was taught, and in the talk, I said, one day I looked around of who was in my life, and I was blown away to realize that some of the most important people in my life, all these amazing women, all had ADHD. And I
Oh,
thought, okay, what the
oh,
hell? It's not like I put an ad in the newspaper. So I was like, how did this happen? And then I realized it's like birds of a feather. Like we bring the pizzazz, like I said, we kind of we're attracted to each other. Like all of my best friends, like dearest friends, also have ADHD. And I think, we understand each other. We also talk out loud, how we verbally process things. We can keep up with each other, all the different thoughts we're having, like ping pong around. So I really realized, wow, that's pretty cool that we've all come together without even trying to do that. And I'm really grateful for that. And I've had I'll have these memories over the years of times when I didn't know I had ADHD, and I'll think back and I'll be like, oh my God, I used to work in the serving industry, like I worked in the bar industry for years and years. And this was like my party trick. If it was a table of like 10 people, I would take all their orders and I didn't write anything down. And they would ask me, how do you do that? Because I'd never mess it up. They would say, how do you do that? And I would
really?
just laugh and say, practice. But I would also ask myself, how do I do that? And I didn't know an answer. And it wasn't until years later when I found out I had ADHD, I'm like, that's how I did it, because it was boring and I was making it interesting. I was making the night. I would compete with myself. Can I remember all these orders? And I'd have like competitions with my own brain. So that's something I've learned that you can do if you have ADHD and you got to do a task you don't want to do, like washing the dishes. You should time yourself. Like, how quickly can you wash them? Because then you're creating like an urgency and novelty, and you're making like games with your own brain to make mundane tasks that you hate interesting.
Okay. So tell
Yeah.
me, how did you remember all of those orders without writing them down? Like, did you imagine the picture in your head
Yeah.
or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So I'd be like guy in the blue shirt, and I would, so I associated things because my brain was able to do that. And
Yeah.
so I never really understood my ability to do it, but I would always test myself. It'd be like a table of 6 and then a table of 10. And then, yeah, so imagine my surprise. I find out I have ADHD and I'm like, oh, that's what that was. Because most people don't have the imagery, I don't think, that like ADHD brains have. I very much am able to, yeah, like blue shirt, espresso martini, like I'm really able
Oh.
to like match things together and then like keep them in my brain. Now, mind you, if I'm trying to think of a word, I might forget the word. It's like,
Well, that's the thing though, and that's where I think ADHD and dyslexia are more right-brained. They're more that, right? They're images because words are very left brain. They're very logical. And so often I'll think of things and then I'll like, it's this, I can't think of the word, but I'm explaining it visually and people are like,
yeah.
oh, that.
I actually
Um,
learned something recently, that everybody learns in different ways. So some people learn visually and some people learn auditory. And then I don't remember what the other words are, but I found it really interesting that if you are, say you're in a relationship and you want to relate to somebody and you're arguing, right? And that they kind of process things in an auditory way. So you're trying to show them this big picture, but you should just, use words instead. Like you should kind of go to how they learn. And I thought that was so interesting because I started to think about the people in my life who say might learn from reading, or I might learn from watching a video. And if you understand that about another person, you can better communicate with them. Yeah, and I thought that was so interesting because I think that with ADHD, we are definitely visual. I am.
Yep. People, I don't use my phone because I can't stand listening to people. I need to see it. So actually text and is so much more helpful for me than audio. Both is good, but definitely think in terms of pictures and visual. And I think there's a whole bunch of untapped resources of what we can do. My
Yes, imagine we
my
leaned into
whole
our magic.
it is magic. My whole process in Inside Out is based on imagery and energy and how that forms. And it is all a more feminine way, it's right brain, of looking at things. And because our society is so left brain and masculine dominated, because of time pressure, because of commodities, I think we're missing a big part of spirit. And it's a big reason why a lot of people are addicted and tend to numb themselves out. They don't have a lot of self-awareness. We're expected to really be cogs in a wheel.
I know that like a lot of people think that there's almost an overdiagnosis of ADHD, but I actually truly believe that a lot of people in the system that are committing crime or addicts or, like a lot of young people especially, I think that a lot of those people are actually struggling with undiagnosed ADHD. And if we put resources into that, we'd actually help them better. I really do believe that, because when you have ADHD, it's really unfortunate, but you have a higher chance of becoming an addict, living on the street, and committing suicide. And so the reason for that, I think, is also because you can't show up as yourself, and you are spending your whole life trying to fit into a round hole, like you're a square peg in a round hole. And so you don't understand yourself, and you're going around your undiagnosed ADHD, so you don't even understand why you're struggling. And so because you're chasing dopamine, you chase it in the wrong ways, and you steal and you do drugs, and you end up becoming part of the system.
Yeah. And I think the system, it's an interesting thing. And I have another quote for you. I'm curious what you think of this. It's from Marshall Rosenberg, who was a PhD in psychology. And after 21 years, he decided he quit and he was done being paid to judge people. So I totally get how diagnosis can help support people. Yet at the same time, I'm hearing you in terms of, okay, self-awareness. Where does this true self-awareness come from? And for me, the big picture is, okay, how can everybody have self-awareness that allows them to identify their feelings and needs in a whole big system? And so this is what he says. This is one of my favorite quotes from him. Any words we use that imply the wrongness of others are tragic, suicidal expressions of what's alive in us. They're tragic and suicidal because they don't lead people to enjoying contributing to our well-being. They provoke defensiveness and counter-aggression. When I first learned this lesson, it was frightening to me because I realized my head was filled with moralistic judgments. And it is this theory of human beings that we are basically selfish and evil. The idea is you have to let people know how terrible they are, and they will change the error of their ways. In the language I was educated to speak growing up in Detroit was like that. When I was driving, if someone else was driving in a way I didn't like, I would say, "Hey, you idiot." And the theory is they're supposed to feel guilty and repent and say, "I'm sorry. I see I was wrong." Now, it's quite a theory, and I thought it was the dialect I learned in Detroit, but when I got my doctorate in psychology, I learned how to insult people in a more educated way. So when they drove in a way I didn't like, I would roll down the window and say, "Hey, sociopath." But telling people what's wrong with them is suicidal and tragic, and it's ineffective. So I said, besides observations and feelings, there's a third component of expressing what's alive in us, our needs. And just as difficult for people to observe without judgments and develop a literacy of feelings, it's difficult for people to develop a literacy of needs. Many people associate needs with something negative, dependent, and selfish. And I think this comes from our education where they try to fit people well into domination structures so they're obedient and submissive to authority. I'll talk more about that later. But both government, schools, companies, and even families operate as domination structures. And the problem with people who are in touch with their needs is that they don't make good slaves. I went to school for 21 years, and I can't recall being asked what my needs were. My education didn't focus on helping me be more alive, more in touch with myself and others. It was oriented toward rewarding me for giving answers as defined by authorities. So I see a lot of ADHD. They're rebels, right? They're defiant. They're like, screw you, I don't abide by the authorities, right?
Yeah. And we're free thinkers. And yeah, like you said, they're not being the slaves to society. I remember posting a birthday post one time. I can't remember how old I was, but I said, I pride myself on still not being a victim of society.
Hmm.
And I think that that quote, yeah, you're so right, because they're just creating carbon copies. But when did you ever learn about boundaries? Like that's actually something that I've only spent the past, I would say, year, even learning so that I could try to implement boundaries in my life because I didn't even know how. And I did know that I was getting upset when people crossed them, but I didn't even have them in place. Like I did mentally, but like didn't even know how to like verbalize that. I didn't even understand it, but I knew I was mad. So
Yeah.
like where was that? We didn't learn anything about that. We didn't learn anything about emotional intelligence. We didn't learn how to advocate for ourselves, how to understand our feelings. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Squash the feelings, more like it.
Yeah.
We didn't learn how to communicate. So we're all just out here in the world trying to navigate the world. And along with it, some of us have different brain. And so we're trying to navigate that at the same time. And yeah,
Yes.
we should
It's
all,
quite a disorder, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
So what if we were all taught how to check in with our body, what we feel and what we need, and then be able to communicate that to others? I'm like, wouldn't
Yeah.
that solve neurotypical and atypical
Oh my
problems?
God, so much. Like
We'd
I
be
said,
able
our
to
beliefs
understand each
create
other.
our reality. Like our beliefs create our reality. And if we don't even, so many of us don't even know what our beliefs are. Like, do you know what your value, like, so many people don't even know what their values are. Most people will reply and say family just because they think they're supposed to, but they don't really know what their values are. A lot of people don't even know what their strengths are. But if I was to ask them, what do you suck at? The list would be endless. They would be able to tell me all the things they suck at. But what are your strengths and what are you good at? Not
Mm.
wouldn't be able to do it the same way. And I think we need to flip the script there and really get to, understand ourselves better. Yeah. I think we would all be better human beings if we understood ourselves a little better.
Yeah. So in your coaching, how do you help people flip that switch?
I did a certification actually on reprogramming subconscious limiting beliefs.
Hmm.
I just try to refrain from using that language because if you're not in that world, you don't have a clue what I'm talking about. So I kind of start with, what are your limiting beliefs? What are the things that are holding you back? And then I was certified in like trying to, yeah, flip the script on that so that you can say that we all have hidden fears. A lot of us have the same hidden fears, a fear of being seen, a fear of failure, um, but they all stem from our childhood. Like we create these beliefs in our minds before we're even 7 years old. And it's not really our fault. It's just what we're taking in the world, right? And then that's how we go out into the world. And so for a lot of us, like we're holding back, even though we might tell ourselves, like I told myself for a long time, like, oh yeah, I can do that. But do you know how long it was before I actually left oil and gas? I got to a point where I was so sick of hearing myself talk about leaving. I couldn't imagine how other people felt in hearing me talk about how I didn't belong here and I didn't want to be here. But to bet on yourself, to take the leap on myself, to believe that I could go out into the world and start my own business and do my own thing. Who was I to do that? And at the same time, I was telling people, yeah, I'm confident. I can do this. Like, I can absolutely go out and do it. So, you know what's going on in there. But that's my internal beliefs. I was afraid of failing. And, the only way to really get past that is to figure out what your limiting beliefs are, what it is that's holding you back, and then rewrite the script. And people often say, oh, you're so confident, but you get confident from doing the things that scare the shit out of you. That's where that
Yes.
comes from. You don't gain the confidence and then do the thing. You do the thing and then you get the confidence. And people don't even know that, right? Like that was also something that I learned. I wasn't going to get confident and then step on stage and talk about ADHD. I was going to step on stage and talk about ADHD and then feel more confident doing it. And so, yeah, I recently attended an event on Sunday actually, and we all had to bring a gift. And she had us hold the gift in our hands and she said, okay, the gift that you brought, and it had to be something meaningful. She said, it's the gift that you bring to the world. And I had brought a deck of cards and they were motivational cards. And on it, it said, you got this. And in that moment, like I almost cried because I was like, whoa, that is the gift I bring to the world, is to motivate people and help them feel capable and help them embrace their strengths and their ADHD and lean into that. and go and bet on themselves and take the leap and do the thing that's on their heart that they've always wanted to do. And I just thought, wow, when I bought this deck of cards today to bring, I had no idea. I was standing there like, oh my God, that is so right. That is the gift I bring to the world. So I think we all bring a gift to the world. And I really want to help women embrace that and lean into that. And, sometimes I think that if we have somebody in our corner and we have somebody that's, that understands and that's helping us believe in ourselves, like that's what we really need is like, just borrow my belief in you.
Ah, yeah. And so this comes down to community then. And I'm curious, you said you have all these women surrounding you. If there's people that want to join a community that are creative, that want to step into their God-living life, their authenticity, their right livelihood, as I would call it, where would you tell them to go?
Well, I'm going to create a community, but I just haven't. It's not launching until April.
April.
Um,
Okay. That's
yeah.
all good. That's soon.
Um, but I also host events. I mean, if you're local to Edmonton, I host events where I bring women together. So I post about those on my Instagram because I think that when women come together, we really support each other. We can crack open the parts of ourselves that we're probably hiding from. And even though, they say like women judge other women, I think in certain containers, when you bring women together, we all realize like, wow, we're all struggling with the same things. We should all have each other's back. So yeah,
Amazing.
I host events. I attend a lot of events. But yeah, I guess stay tuned and I'll post about it and you can come join my amazing circle of women.
I look forward to it. So where can people find you? What's your handle on Instagram?
Instagram, it's Lorie on Fire.
Lorie on
And
Fire. Okay. Yep.
Lorie on
Hmm.
Fire. Yeah, I'm chasing the big dreams and I want to show other people that they can do that too. And it's Lorie Alexandria and everything else, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Lorie Alexandria. Perfect.
Mhm.
Yes. So, there any final words today about how people get resourced from the inside in terms of if they're wondering if they have ADHD and what benefits that they can get from actually getting diagnosed or acknowledging or being part of your community?
Yeah, I think that if you're relating to posts about ADHD, like if you're reading them and you're like, damn, that's me. I would suggest, looking into diagnosis. You can also, I'm sure everyone knows someone that has ADHD, so you could talk to a friend about it. You could reach out to me about it if you want. Like lots of people do that. Yeah, I think that you find your community, like you said, find people that understand you. It make a world of difference in your life to have people understand you.
Mm. And so I don't know, how do you get diagnosed here in Alberta?
Um, so we are actually pretty lucky because I mean there is parts of the world where you end up on a wait list for years and years, but here, you would talk to your family doctor first. But unfortunately, there are a lot of doctors that are going to say, "Oh, you're just stressed out because you're a woman and you have a lot of responsibilities." And there's a lot of misdiagnosis like anxiety, depression,
Hmm.
so you have to advocate for yourself. Like I know people who have been prescribed antipsychotic medication, antidepressant medication, and it was not what they needed. And the thing is too, like I got the diagnosis, so most likely they'll think, okay, I want this diagnosis so then I can go on medication. You don't
Mm.
necessarily have to do that. Like just because you're getting the diagnosis, like you don't need to take these pills if you don't want to, but if you think they will absolutely change your life, go for it. But yeah, your first step will be talking to your doctor. And your second step would be if he tries to convince you that maybe you're just stressed out, maybe go to a different doctor. Especially for women, like misdiagnosis in women is outrageous. I know in BC, there's actually clinics dedicated to ADHD in women.
Yeah.
Not really sure if that exists here in Alberta, but a quick Google search would find that. I was actually diagnosed in Newfoundland from a
Okay.
psychologist. So,
Oh, from a psychologist. Okay. So if a psychologist or a doctor will have some idea. And this
yeah, well,
is,
a doctor would most likely give you a referral, right? Like the way that our system works is you need referrals to talk to, unless you go to a private clinic, you could do that.
right. Okay. Well, I'm excited. So they will look you up. Lorie on Fire on Instagram, right?
We're on fire.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll
Thank
be back.
you.
Yeah, next week, Andre and we're not sure what we're going to be talking about today, but if you want to follow us at Get Resourced, we talk about how we get resourced to self-source and others and everything about relationships here, there, and in between. So thank you for popping on today, and we'll see you next week. Ciao.